March 5, 1943, at the Norfolk Naval Base in Virginia, marked the beginning of a silent revolution as the first American hunter-killer group prepared to venture into the Atlantic. Captain Giles Short, the commanding officer of the USS Bogue, studied a classified communique from the 10th Fleet, a message made possible by ultra-intelligence having successfully broken German naval codes to reveal the specific locations of multiple U-boat refueling rendezvous points. The targeted milk cow supply submarines, U-459 and U-487, were slated to replenish the Wolfpack's devastating convoy routes, prompting the operations officer to secure the line and initiate the mission. A single escort carrier, flanked by the destroyer escorts USS Belknap, USS George E. Badger, USS Osmond Ingram, and USS Clemson, set out to hunt the hunters. Unbeknownst to the crew, this solitary deployment was the spark that would ignite the most catastrophic reversal in the history of submarine warfare. Within a mere 8 months, these American hunter-killer groups would dismantle the myth of U-boat invincibility, compelling Admiral Dönitz to withdraw his entire fleet from the Atlantic. The Battle of the Atlantic had ruthlessly demonstrated to both sides that this was not a contest of sinking ships, but a cold calculation of tonnage. Victory required sinking more tonnage than the enemy could construct, while defeat was the inevitable result of losing submarines faster than they could be replaced. The German Kriegsmarine's U-boat arm had asserted absolute dominance across the shipping lanes, with wolfpacks claiming over 80 ships and nearly 500,000 tons in March 1943 alone. By April, the destruction would surge to a peak of over 600,000 tons, creating an arithmetic reality that favored Germany, as 20 new U-boats entered service monthly against losses of fewer than 10. From his headquarters in France, Admiral Dönitz commanded a force of over 400 submarines, his Wolfpack tactics nearly severing the vital lifeline connecting America and Britain, savaging convoys SC-121 and HX-229 to such an extent that Winston Churchill later confessed the U-boat peril was the only thing that truly terrified him during the war. The USS Bogue, displacing 9,800 tons and crewed by 890 men, possessed a 495-foot flight deck capable of launching 12 F-4F Wildcat fighters and 9 TBF Avenger torpedo bombers, yet her true power lay in technologies the Germans could not yet comprehend. She carried centimeter wavelength radar that remained invisible to German detection gear, high-frequency direction-finding equipment capable of triangulating U-boat radio signals with devastating precision, and tucked within the bomb bays of her Avengers was the secret Mark 24 mine, a cover name for the Fido acoustic homing torpedo. This hunter-killer concept signified a fundamental transformation in anti-submarine warfare, shifting from the reactive constraints of traditional convoy escorts, which had to choose between protection and pursuit, to an offensive force with a singular mission, to locate and annihilate U-boats wherever they roamed. Lieutenant Commander Howard Avery, destined to command Composite Squadron 9 aboard the Bogue, drew upon his Atlantic convoy experience to identify the 3 critical moments of U-boat vulnerability: surfacing to recharge batteries, meeting supply vessels for fuel and torpedoes, and transmitting radio reports to headquarters. German doctrine mandated frequent communication, requiring position reports every 24 hours, immediate contact reports upon sighting convoys, twice daily weather observations, and post-attack damage assessments. Every transmission became a potential death sentence, broadcasting the submarine's location to Allied listening stations. On board U-569, Captain Lieutenant Hans Johansen reviewed his orders after 7 weeks at sea had drained his fuel reserves to critical levels. Radio instructions directed him to a rendezvous with the milk cow U-459 at coordinates 50 degrees 40 minutes north, 35 degrees 21 minutes west. Johansen had commanded the boat since early 1943, succeeding Hans-Peter Hinsch, leading a Type 7C submarine that was the workhorse of the fleet, displacing 769 tons surfaced and 871 tons submerged, armed with 14 torpedoes and manned by 44 men. Her record of 1 ship sunk and another damaged reflected the growing lethality of the Atlantic, yet her greatest weakness remained the same as in the Great War. Diesel engines required air, and electric batteries demanded hours of surface charging. While a Type 7C could loiter submerged for 18 hours at low speeds, high-speed evasion depleted the batteries in less than an hour. American hunter-killer groups exploited these limitations with scientific rigor, utilizing search patterns designed for maximum radar coverage, patrol schedules timed to catch surface boats, and attack protocols meant to maintain pressure until the enemy's energy was exhausted. At 1,420 hours on May 22, 1943, Avenger pilot Lieutenant William Chamberlain picked up a radar contact from a surface submarine 18 miles away on a relative bearing of 090 degrees. Pushing the stick forward, he initiated his attack run on U-569, which was cruising at 15 knots to recharge her batteries after a night of evasion. The bridge watch spotted the aircraft at 8 miles, triggering alarm bells and an emergency dive ordered by Johansen. The crash dive procedure for a Type 7C took 35 seconds to reach periscope depth, involving the opening of ballast tank vents, shutting down diesels, and engaging electric motors as the bow angled sharply down into the flooding tanks. Lieutenant Chamberlain's depth charges, for Mark 17 set for shallow detonation, bracketed U-569 just as she submerged, inflicting severe damage that forced her back to the surface. A second Avenger, piloted by Howard Roberts, arrived immediately but held fire upon seeing white flags on the periscope, signaling the crew's surrender. The Canadian destroyer HMCS St. Laurent raced to the scene, but as she drew near, Johansen ordered the boat scuttled and abandoned. While 19 men sank with the vessel, 25 survivors were pulled from the Atlantic, and their subsequent capture provided Allied intelligence with crucial insights. During interrogation, the German submariners revealed their shock at the precision of the American attacks, with one survivor remarking that it felt as though the enemy could see through the ocean itself. However, ultra-intelligence provided more than just individual positions. Cryptanalysts at Bletchley Park had deciphered the German naval grid system, exposing patrol zones, assembly points, and supply coordinates. Every U-boat at sea was now potentially compromised. On June 5, 1943, aircraft from the USS Bogue detected U-217 charging batteries on the surface 450 miles west of the Azores. Captain Lieutenant Kurt Reichenbach-Klink, a veteran of 3 patrols with 3 ships sunk totaling 10,651 tons, was caught in the vulnerable moments before a dive could be executed. The initial depth charges from the Bogue's Avengers damaged the diving mechanism, trapping the submarine on the surface where Reichenbach-Klink ordered his gunners to engage while damage control teams struggled in vain. The surface battle raged for 18 minutes, with U-217's 88mm deck gun and 20mm anti-aircraft weapons firing over 300 rounds, causing minor damage to one Wildcat, but the submarine was fighting a losing war against aircraft purpose-built for its destruction. An Avenger delivered the final blow with a perfectly bracketed depth charge pattern that shattered the pressure hull, sending U-217 and her entire crew of 50, including her commander, to the bottom, leaving only an oil slick as a grave marker. The psychological shockwave hitting U-boat crews was immediate, with radio intercepts betraying growing anxiety over American wonder weapons that seemed inescapable, leading to morale reports of crews hesitant to surface even for essential charging. Admiral Dönitz attempted to stem the bleeding with tactical shifts, ordering U-boats to cross the Bay of Biscay submerged despite battery drain, restricting refueling to night hours, and minimizing radio traffic, yet these were mere delays to the inevitable. The Americans possessed momentum and technology that no tactical adjustment could counter. By June 1943, 5 hunter-killer groups, USS Bogue, USS Card, USS Core, USS Santee, and USS Croatan, were prowling the Atlantic, representing an industrial might Germany could not match. The USS Card, under Captain Arnold Buster Isbell, would rise to become one of the war's most lethal groups, accounting for 8 confirmed kills between July and October 1943 and earning the first presidential unit citation for such a unit. Card's team standardized the doctrine of expanding box search patterns and immediate attacks on radar contacts, marking crash dives with die and coordinating destroyer escorts to unleash hedgehog mortars and depth charges. On August 7, 1943, Card's aircraft caught the milk cow U-117 refueling U-66 on the surface, catching the supply boat with fuel hoses still attached and rendering a crash dive impossible. Lieutenant Charles Stapler's Avenger attacked instantly, dropping 4 depth charges that straddled U-117, detonating over 400 tons of diesel fuel in a pillar of fire visible for 30 miles. Although U-66 managed to crash dive with damage, she survived only to meet her end 9 months later in a bizarre confrontation. Captain Lieutenant Klaus Bargston of U-521, watching U-117's destruction from periscope depth, recorded in his war diary the terrified realization that the Americans were everywhere, striking without warning with impossible accuracy, transforming the hunters into the hunted. October 1943 became the turning point that defined the rest of the Atlantic War, as the U-boat arm lost 23 submarines, including irreplaceable veteran commanders, and the devastating loss of milk cows U-488, U-489, and U-490 within weeks of each other. Stripped of refueling capabilities, Type 7C boats were forced to retreat from the American coast to the mid-Atlantic, where hunter-killer groups waited in increasing numbers. The USS Core's group perfected the art of continuous air coverage, keeping aircraft over suspected areas for days to exhaust submarine batteries through relentless pursuit, a technique that broke even the most experienced commanders. On October 13, 1943, Core's group surprised U-378 on the surface at dawn, where its commander, Oberleutnant Zuersi Erich Mader, fresh from his 26th birthday, made the fatal inexperienced error of fighting on the surface instead of diving. 4 Wildcats strafed the boat while 2 Avengers lined up for depth charge runs, and though the German gunners damaged 1 plane, they were swept from the conning tower before depth charges shattered the hull, leaving only 1 survivor. The brutality of these engagements stunned veterans like Corvettan Captain Heinrich Bleikrot, a top ace with 24 kills, who barely survived an attack by USS Block Island's aircraft in October 1943 and returned to port with a battered U-109, vowing never to sail again and declaring the Atlantic a slaughterhouse. November 1943 introduced further American innovations, including the magnetic anomaly detector, MAD, for finding submerged boats and sonobuoys for tracking them, creating an insurmountable technological gap. Captain Lieutenant Ralph Heinrich Hauptmann, a skilled tactician commanding U-405, had survived 7 patrols using weather to mask his movements, but on October 31, 1943, his luck ran out against the USS Card's group. The destroyer USS Bogue gained radar contact at 6,500 yards, leading to a legendary encounter where U-405, forced to the surface by depth charges, engaged in a close-quarters gun battle. In heavy seas, the 2 vessels collided and locked together, prompting a surreal melee where sailors exchanged small arms fire and Americans hurled coffee mugs, shell casings, and a sheath knife at the German crew. After separating, the Bogue unleashed over 4,000 rounds of ammunition, riddling the U-boat until Hauptmann ordered the ship abandoned. He did not survive, and only 8 of his 49 men were rescued from the freezing waters. The Bogue was so badly damaged she had to be scuttled the next day, but the battle proved that even the most seasoned U-boat commanders could not survive determined hunter-killer attacks. The success of these groups was driven by an operations research revolution that used probability theory to optimize search patterns, acoustic analysis to identify specific propeller signatures, and statistical models to predict behavior. High-frequency direction finding was particularly lethal, as Allied stations could triangulate the briefest German radio bursts within a 2-mile radius, forcing commanders to choose between the tactical suicide of radio silence or the revelation of their position. Unknown to the Germans, who believed their Enigma system secure, British cryptanalysts had broken the 4-order M4 cipher after capturing codebooks from U-559, allowing Allied intelligence to read Dönitz's orders within hours. December 1943 witnessed the destruction of veteran boats like U-172, commanded by the elite Captain Lieutenant Hermann Hoffmann, whose crew had sunk 26 ships. Intercepted by the USS Bogue group on December 13 after a weather report betrayed its location, U-172 evaded an initial Fido homing torpedo but was forced into battery-draining maneuvers. For 14 hours, 3 more aircraft maintained contact until, With energy and air exhausted on the morning of December 14th, Hoffman surfaced to fight. The ensuing 43-minute battle with destroyers USS George E. Badger, USS Clemson, USS DuPont, and USS Osmond Ingram saw the sub hit 17 times before sinking, taking 46 men with her. The 13 survivors later confessed that the ocean had become a trap where they could neither hide, run, nor fight. By early 1944, the U-boat force was being systematically erased, with losses accelerating from 19 in January to 23 in March. Inexperienced commanders like 23-year-old Oberleutnant Zur C. Wolfgang Herr of U-434 were sent to their deaths with minimal training, leading to fatal decisions like fighting on the surface against the USS Card's aircraft, resulting in total loss of life. As American pilots and operators honed their skills to distinguish submarines from surface clutter and identify individual boats by sound, the German crews grew younger and less capable, with the average commander's age dropping to 26. Even Admiral Dönitz's own son, Peter, serving on U-954, was lost with all hands in May 1943, a personal tragedy that did not stop the Admiral from feeding more young men into the grinder. Spring 1944 brought centimetric radar to all hunter-killer aircraft, eliminating the safety of darkness, while the lights turned night into day, making evasion impossible. On May 6, 1944, the destroyer escort USS Buckley engaged U-66 in one of the war's most bizarre battles west of the Cape Verde Islands. Oberleutnant Gerhard Seehausen, despite his experience, could not dive due to depleted batteries and attempted to ram the Buckley, leading to a hull-grinding collision where sailors once again exchanged hand grenades and coffee mugs alongside small arms fire. In 16 minutes, the Buckley fired thousands of rounds, perforating U-66 until she sank with half her crew, marking the violent end of the surface raider era. The capture of U-505 on June 4, 1944, by Captain Daniel Gallery's USS Guadalcanal Group, was the ultimate display of dominance, as a boarding party from the USS Pillsbury saved the flooding submarine to secure an intelligence treasure trove of codebooks and torpedoes, symbolizing the reduction of U-boats from predators to prizes. Following the invasion of France in June 1944, the Bay of Biscay became a killing zone where 15 U-boats were destroyed in a week, with survivors describing the horror of being swarmed by aircraft immediately upon surfacing. Captain Lieutenant Herbert Werner later described the experience as systematic extermination, where radar detection was followed instantly by sonobuoys and relentless pursuit. By August 1944, the evacuation of French bases saw U-boats running a gauntlet to Norway, with 11 of 31 boats destroyed and the survivors arriving battered. The introduction of the Schnorchel allowed submerged diesel operation but limited speed to 6 knots, a defensive measure that came too late to restore offensive power. By September 1944, improved Mark 24 torpedoes, Hedgehog mortars, and high-resolution radar created an absolute technological mismatch. Captain Lieutenant Goth of U-10 recorded in his diary the despair of facing machines that never tired or missed, after witnessing the destruction of 3 wolfpack mates in a single night in October. The final months of 1944 saw unsustainable losses, with 24 boats sunk in November and 27 in December, as training facilities crumbled and fuel ran dry. Dönitz continued to send out boats, often commanded by officers who had barely finished school, like Oberleutnant Zur C. Ernst Gunther Unterhorst of U-396, whose crew averaged 20 years old and was wiped out by the USS Core group just 3 days after leaving Norway. Although the advanced Type XXI submarines promised high submerged speeds, only 2 became operational before the war ended, unable to alter the outcome decided by the hunter-killer groups. The statistics were stark. From sinking 6.2 million tons of Allied shipping in 1942, U-boat success plummeted to 773,000 tons in 1944, a 90% reduction in effectiveness. Meanwhile, American shipyards churned out 3 Liberty ships every 2 days, rendering the tonnage war unwinnable for Germany. By March 1945, the U-boat force was effectively extinct, with fewer than 60 of 463 available boats actually operational. The final humiliation occurred in April 1945 when U-546 sank the USS Frederick C. Davis, only to be immediately hunted down and destroyed by the USS Bogue's escorts, the carrier's 13th and final kill. In his final war diary entry, Admiral Dönitz bitterly admitted that superior enemy science and technology had snatched away their most effective weapon, ending the submarine war in defeat. The transformation had taken less than 2 years to turn the U-boat force from a strangling threat into a remnant cowering in port. Operations research and practical refinement had optimized every aspect of the hunt, with the USS Bogue claiming 13 kills, USS Card 11, and USS Core 6, proving that integrated combat systems of intelligence, technology, and industry were the future of warfare. The romantic era of individual submarine heroism was dead, replaced by systematic slaughter. German captains, once the Grey Wolves, found themselves shocked not just by tactical defeat but by their existential reduction to prey in a transparent ocean. Corvette Captain Peter Kramer later reflected that they had no answer to an enemy who could be everywhere at once, possessing radar, weapons, and intelligence that dismantled them overnight. The human cost was staggering. 30,000 of 40,000 German submariners never returned, a 75% casualty rate, with 784 U-boats destroyed. In contrast, American hunter-killer losses were minimal, losing only one carrier, the USS Block Island, and fewer than 10 destroyer escorts, reversing the exchange ratio from 10-1 in favor of U-boats to 20-1 in favor of the Americans. These tactics became the foundation of modern naval doctrine, influencing Cold War anti-submarine warfare and cementing the psychological reality that industrial capacity and science would decide future conflicts. In May 1945, as Germany fell, the remaining U-boats surfaced under black flags to surrender, many commanded by teenagers surrendering to the very groups that had hunted them with such terrifying efficiency. The last patrol ended on May 7, 1945, with the sinking of U-320 and the loss of its 24-year-old commander, symbolizing the total destruction of the force. Post-war analysis confirmed that search patterns, weapon delivery, and intelligence correlation had been scientifically perfected to turn the Atlantic into an execution ground. The shock for the Germans was the speed of their collapse, from near victory in early 1943 to extinction by late that year, a result of integrated radar, aircraft, weapons, and intelligence. Admiral Dönitz, writing from Spandau prison, acknowledged that he had learned too late that technology and industry were decisive, and that better systems, not better sailors, had defeated him. The legacy of these hunter-killer groups lives on in the nuclear submarines and integrated naval forces of today. Over 500 German submarines now rust on the Atlantic floor, monuments to the American groups that turned a desperate defense into an offensive annihilation. The young German crews who believed they were elite warriors discovered they were fighting an enemy who had replaced the art of combat with the science of destruction. This shock resonated through history, marking the moment when technology, intelligence, and industry fundamentally altered naval warfare, transforming the ocean from a sanctuary into a killing field where precision dictated survival. Ultimately, the hunter-killer groups sank 784 U-boats and killed 30,000 submariners while losing fewer than 5,000 men, proving that the era of the lone wolf was over and that the future belonged to the coordinated, scientific application of overwhelming force.